So the parasympathetic division is the opposite of the sympathetic division. Now, it is known as the rest and digest response because it is responsible for digestion, defecation, and diuresis or urination. Okay, so when you're relaxed, your food gets digested because all your energy, the blood supply, gets restored to the intestine. And then you have defecation because your food is effectively pushed through the large intestine and causes defecation. And then it causes urination or diuresis because the sphincter muscles dilate and allow urination. Okay? Now, the main features of the parasympathetic nervous system include a decreased metabolic rate because it is the opposite, okay? Your body is calming down, so you don't need that much energy. So the metabolism rate decreases, the heart rate decreases, and the blood pressure decreases. And it increases secretion by the salivary and digestive glands. Now, in the sympathetic nervous system, I want to mention something about the salivary gland because when you have the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, it stimulates the secretion of thick viscous saliva. So it's not the normal watery saliva that we have. So when we get startled, when we are stressed, our throat becomes dry, our mouth becomes dry, right? But when the parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, the salivary glands secretes watery saliva. So we don't feel very thirsty, okay? And then it increases secretion of the digestive juices in the digestive glands, okay? It increases motility and blood flow to the digestive tract. So we start resting and digesting and our body calms back down. It stimulates urination and defecation. So these are the key features of the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system or the division is predominant when we are at rest and when we are calm. It is also called the craniosacral division. If you don't remember, we just looked at it. Craniosacral division. The axons evolve from the brainstem nuclei and the lateral gray horns of the sacral segment of the spinal cord. And that's why it is called the craniosacral division. The axons innervate the ganglia either close to the organs or within the tissues of the target organs itself. And the parasympathetic nerve fibers run in, well, four major nerves. Okay, the first one is the oculomotor nerves. And then you have the facial nerve. Then you have the glossopharyngeal nerve. The last one, what am I missing? The vagus nerve or the vagus nerve. The oculomotor nerve is number 3, cranial number 3. Facial nerve is cranial nerve number 7. The glossopharyngeal nerve is cranial nerve number 9. The vagus nerve is cranial nerve number 10. So these are the the preganglionic fibers in the parasympathetic division run in these four cranial nerves. So their cell bodies are present in the brainstem in the motor nuclei associated with these cranial nerves. So a typical preganglionic fiber synapses onto 6 to 8 ganglionic neurons in a parasympathetic division. And there are two types of ganglia found in the parasympathetic division. The first one is the terminal ganglia. The terminal ganglia is located very close to the target organ, and it is usually paired because they are located far away from the origin of the terminal ends, and that's why they are paired. So we have, for example, 4 pairs of cranial parasympathetic ganglia that innervate the structures in the head. And the next type of Parasympathetic ganglia are known as intramural ganglia. The intramural ganglia are embedded inside the tissue of the target organ. So that's a major difference. Okay, so the terminal ganglia are located near the target organ, but the intramural ganglia, murus means wall, so the intramural ganglia are located inside the tissues of the target organ, and they typically consist of interconnected masses and clusters of ganglionic cells in that region. So this over here is interesting and important because in the parasympathetic nervous division, the preganglionic fibers run inside the cranial nerves, specifically cranial nerve 3, 7, 9, and 10, which is the vagus nerve. Now, the cranial nerves 3, 7, and 10 supply literally the entire head, whereas the vagus nerve, on the other hand, provides innervation to 75% of all the parasympathetic outflow. Now, because this vagus nerve innervates the cardiac plexus and it innervates sorry about that. So yeah, so it innervates the cardiac plexus and it innervates literally every organ in the thoracic and abdominal cavity. So the vagus nerve has a lot of work to do. So so specifically sends branches to the cardiac plexus that slow the heart rate, and it sends impulses to the pulmonary plexus that serve the lungs and the bronchi. So it controls our breathing rate, so we breathe slowly, not hurriedly. And then it also innervates the esophagus, which supply the esophagus, obviously. Okay, and that means it helps in peristalsis for gulping food. Okay. So the other three nerves, which are the oculomotor, facial nerve, and glossopharyngeal nerve, supply a fairly small region in the, what is this called? The head. So let's look at it one by one. The first nerve is the oculomotor nerve. Oculomotor nerve is also cranial nerve number 3. They send impulses to the smooth muscles in the eye, and they causes the pupil or the pupil of the eye to constrict. Okay, and the cell bodies of the postganglionic neuron in this nerve are in the ciliary ganglion that are present close to the eye. Okay. Now this other nerve, which is facial nerve number 7. The facial nerve number 7 stimulate a lot of large glands in the head, like the salivary gland in the oral cavity, and they also stimulate the lacrimal gland, that is the eyes. Lacrimal gland is where the tear duct is present. Okay, so the facial nerve 7 act upon the lacrimal gland as well. And then you have the glossopharyngeal nerve. The glossopharyngeal nerve is nerve number 9. The glossopharyngeal nerve originates right over here, and the parasympathetic in the glossopharyngeal nerve are located very close to the the base of the skull. And the main region this glossopharyngeal nerve innervate is the salivary gland in the ears. Yeah, so salivary gland in the ears. So that's why it's called the otic ganglion, because otitis, it means inflammation of the ears. Otic means something to do with the ears. Now later when you look at the baroreflexes of the heart, we'll come across vagus nerve and glossopharyngeal nerve again. So make sure you know the number of these nerves, whether they are, cranial nerve 3 or 7 or 9 or 10. Okay, so vagus nerve is cranial nerve number 10. You'll come across these nerves again and again, so make sure you know what these mean and what they do. Now, another group of nerves that emerge from the sacral region. These are called the sacral preganglionic nerve fibers. These nerve fibers carry the sacral parasympathetic output directly. Okay, they do not join the spinal nerves anywhere. They form distinct pelvic nerves and they innervate structures like the kidney, the bladder, the large intestine, and the sex organs. Now keep in mind the parasympathetic nervous system has no effect on the blood vessels. They do not dilate or contract the blood vessels. So they do not affect the blood vessels of the heart. They do not affect the blood vessels of the body. Oh, I'm missing a word over here, but that's okay. This is the parasympathetic division. Now the parasympathetic division consists of two types of ganglia, the terminal ganglia. So the terminal ganglia can be of three types, which I'm not going to go into too much detail right now. And the other type is the intramural ganglia. So these three over here, ciliary, submandibular, and the otic ganglia, these are terminal ganglia because they form the ganglia closer to the target organ. Intramural ganglia synapse with the postganglionic nerve in the wall or inside the tissue of the target organ. So make sure you know the difference. And the preganglionic nerve fibers run through these four very important cranial nerves, and they target different structures in the body. Keep in mind, vagus nerve provides innervation to about 75% of all the parasympathetic outflow. Okay, and it innervates most organs of the neck, the thoracic cavity, and almost every region in the abdominal, every structure in the abdominal cavity. The pelvic nerves directly supply the target organ. They do not enter the spinal cord and then supply the target organ. So they do not join the spinal nerves. They form their own distinct group of pelvic nerves to innervate the kidneys, the bladder, the large intestine, and mainly the sex organs. The parasympathetic division is also known as the anabolic system. Anabolism is, well, making bigger macromolecules with smaller molecules. Okay, so anabolism involves increasing nutrients in the blood and increasing the supply, energy supply for the sympathetic nervous division. So this is also called the anabolic nervous system. The parasympathetic division helps in growth and development, helps in storing excess lipids in adipose tissue, and it helps in conserving energy. So it converts all the excess glucose in the bloodstream into glycogen for later use. All right, so this picture basically summarizes the differences and similarities in sympathetic and parasympathetic division. Over here, you see the sympathetic division. Keep in mind, sympathetic will help you in the fight or flight response. Parasympathetic is rest and digest response. The sympathetic nervous system, the ganglion are present closer to the vertebrae, whereas in the parasympathetic division, the postganglionic fiber synapse closer to the target organ or inside the walls of the target tissue. All right, so the location of the sympathetic nervous system is in the lateral gray horns of the spinal segments, which is T1 to L2, whereas the parasympathetic division emerge from the brainstem and the sacral regions. Now, the ganglia of the peripheral nervous system are located near the vertebral column and the spinal cord. in the form of paravertebral ganglionic chains. Whereas in parasympathetic division, they are intramural, meaning they are located away from the vertebrae, closer to the target organ and inside the walls of the tissue. The preganglionic fibers are short in sympathetic division, but they are relatively long in parasympathetic division. The neurotransmitter in both the cases is going to be acetylcholine in the preganglionic fibers. The postganglionic fibers are long in the sympathetic division and short in the parasympathetic division. And the neurotransmitter is normally norepinephrine. It's very rare that you see ACH or nitric oxide, but it's usually norepinephrine. So if you remember, we saw how nerve impulse is transmitted through the sympathetic division. And at the axon terminal of a postganglionic fiber, it's always norepinephrine that's released. In the parasympathetic division, it is acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter. The general functions of the sympathetic division include the fight or flight response. So it increases the heart rate, stimulates metabolism, increases alertness, constricts the blood vessels, increases the blood pressure. The parasympathetic division has a calming effect. So it's called the rest and digest system that promotes energy storage and nutrient uptake, digestion, defecation, and urination.